Welcome back to the Cloud OS Week online. You're still watching the track Transform the Data Center. Good evening, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you may be. My name is Damian Flynn, and in this recording, we're going to take a look at Microsoft's Azure Pack. I'm based out of the west of Ireland and have the honor of being a MVP focused on Microsoft's cloud and data center technologies, and previously on Microsoft virtualization technologies, including Hyper-V and Virtual Machine Manager. I have a keen interest in working with software-defined networks, understanding the technologies, leveraging some of the features that are being offered to Microsoft's NVGRE implementations, and of course Cisco's and VMware's VXLAN. I spend my time primarily working on the Microsoft stack, but also with open source tools such as OpenStack. And I am a keen author working on 3 books with some very prestiged names in the enterprise, including Aidan Finn, Hans Verdeforth, Michel Lucifer, and from Microsoft, people like Nigel Kane and Alvin Morales, who've helped with developing of their final and latest book, which is available now for you for free from the Microsoft Download Center, and that is, of course, the Microsoft System Center, building a virtualized network solution, where we focus quite a lot on Microsoft's Virtual Machine Manager and the emphasis around virtual logical networks and the different type of networking technologies and how best to decide which of those would fit your environment. But a little less about me and a little bit more about the Azure Pack. So let's get started. In this presentation, we're going to take a little look at what is the Azure Pack. We'll go under the covers and figure out a little piece about the framework and how that framework is enabled using technology known as providers. What do they really do? And does this really translate into that single pane of glass view that we've been asking Microsoft to deliver us for years and years as we see more and more portals appear across the environment? To answer those questions, we really need to think a little bit more about what is Azure Pack. Is it really just another portal, or is this the portal? Well, let's see. Azure Pack started as a theory based on Microsoft's Azure platform. Azure has been around for 4 or 5 years at this point, and as Azure has started to emerge, one of the key things as users we have been engaging with is a unified portal experience, a self-service portal, where we've had our abilities to access resources, including services like virtual machines, SQL, service bus, websites, and lots of other services as time has progressed, including authentication and content delivery. And it continues to evolve as Microsoft continue to deliver new services to the Azure platform. The unification, however, of a hybrid cloud solution is part of the seeding behind what the Azure Pack is. And with the Cloud OS, Microsoft have taken the Windows Server 2012 or 2 platform along with System Center 2012 or 2, and leveraged a new component which has been added to that suite, known as the Service Provider Foundation. Now this component's hidden away nice and safely on the Orchestrator installation disks, and its job essentially is to translate commands that are supplied to System Center and Windows Server across a secure HTTPS connection into PowerShell, which can then be targeted against the System Center and Windows Server environment, and then the results of those can be once more retransmitted across that HTTPS connection. This makes it quite friendly from a firewalling perspective and allows us to actually start building out an environment that is enterprise or hoster scalable and yet will follow pretty much all of our security requirements we need to do. The portals that were presented, the self-service portal, is essentially a clone of the portal that exists in the public Azure offering and has been co-developed through the 2 teams that are responsible for Azure Pack and Microsoft Azure. But in addition to that single portal, a second portal has been introduced. That second portal is for the providers. Those providers essentially are the functions that we use as administrators to provide services. Quite simple to think about. Now we'll think a little bit more about how those are communicated. So these two portals essentially sit on top of an API known as the Service Management API. And this Management API is quite sophisticated in what it does. So initially we immediately see this is not just any other portal. This portal has not one but two different APIs in place. We have the Service Management API and the Service Provider API, and we've already got two new portals added on top. Of course, because the APIs are exactly that, these are public, they're open, and if you do not require or want to use Microsoft's predefined or pre-delivered portals, you are more than welcome to PowerShell against the Service Management API or Service Provider API, or deliver your own portals. And those portals could, of course, be on HTML or even through web apps or mobile device apps. Behind the scenes, we then have these providers, and the providers enable the Service Management API to render up services into our portals so that we as providers can configure them. And of course, as consumers, we can actually deliver those out with all of the normal restrictions, roles, and quota management that we would expect as an IT delivery. So using this platform, we are placing ourselves to be capable of delivering workloads. And as we get our users involved in these technologies, they're going to find a consistent feel between cloud services and IT services we deliver to our enterprise on-premise or deliver to our enterprise from the cloud. So why are we getting excited? Well, I think it's pretty clear. We've just proven that this is just not another portal. This portal has got a lot of sophisticated thought gone behind it. It's based on the now proven Azure environment, and maybe we need to take just a slightly closer look at just exactly what's going on there. So to do that, we'll take a little bit of a vision, and we'll see that there are, in my graph, the Service Management API taking up essentially all of the environment. This is the heart and soul of everything that happens in Azure Pack. Sitting on top of that, of course, we have the portals, the administrative and the tenant portal. And these portals are rich HTML5 portals. They can even be used on mobile devices, although they are not yet optimized. Or, of course, because this is a management API, as I've already mentioned, you could, of course, deliver or develop your own portals or applications to connect into this API. Now, why is this API so special? Because the API is built and targeted all of its configurations to be stored in one single SQL management database. This database essentially keeps a list of everything that's connected to the API, how they're connected, and even where they're located. So it may be on different servers in a distributed environment. And as we start thinking about what does that really mean, we can introduce some of these different locations. For example, we have an admin API. So as you'll start to see pretty quickly, there isn't just one API behind the scenes, but there are multiple APIs. We have an API for tenants, and we've also got an API for public communications. So behind the scenes, this admin API is designed to allow us start figuring out how to actually slice up our resources to provision to our tenants. The tenant API allows us to take that a step further and let them consume and start measuring utilization that they have from the resources they've been provided through the admin API. And then we've got some common API, which is publicly available so tenants can actually connect to this using scripting and other technologies to retrieve information about their utilization in their clouds. Of course, if any portal is to be utilized, it needs to be secure, and following our API formats, we're introducing two more APIs, one for administrators and one for tenants. Now, these APIs are quite important and quite sophisticated because these allow us to actually leverage technologies such as Active Directory Federation services so that we can have authentication from our on-premise enterprise Active Directory services or from any other federated identity. So simply connecting our APIs to services like Azure Active Directory allows us to leverage somewhere over 1,000 different identities, including Twitter, to log in to our portals. So, is this a reason to start getting excited? It certainly is, but it's not enough. We need to think a little bit more because behind the framework we need a little bit of power, and the power starts with what can that framework deliver. Microsoft have leveraged their existing providers and started delivering some of those to us for consumption in the Azure Pack. So IT services that we need to deliver to support our business on websites, on virtual machines, on databases, on automation technologies, and of course on Service Bus are already in the box and available for us to consume. All of these technologies follow the exact same framework, allowing them integration directly into Service Management API and then rendering through their portals, giving everything that we give to our users and to our administrators a consistent feel and consistently using standards across the environment. So let's take a little closer look at just how these providers are truly created. So we'll start with the websites, and quickly we can see that the websites are built on top of standard Windows servers using web farming technologies, which were introduced with Microsoft's Windows many years ago. The only new change on this is we have added a controller, a HTTPS endpoint, which communicates with the web farm framework. In a similar manner, if we wanted to deliver IaaS or infrastructure as a service, then we would use our virtual machine provider, where again our technology is using Windows Server, sitting with Virtual Machine Manager as the actual main engine, but now leveraging that new service provider framework, which we mentioned already was again a HTTPS to PowerShell type converter, allowing us to configure and control and manage Virtual Machine Manager through this API. Now, if we continue that same theory, you can see that the procedure becomes exactly the same across all of the different providers that Microsoft have delivered to us so far. Each of these have a HTTP endpoint at the top that connects directly to the Service Management API, and that then glues together not only the control where we're telling the different systems to tell us what they're doing or tell them what to do, but they also provide information like utilization. So we can do control, we can do costs, we can do all different types of metrics and gather all that in the Service Management API to render back to the portal or to send forward to some of our reporting technologies. So let's take a closer look at what this portal actually looks like. So the administrative portal looks just like the portal we see in Windows Azure. The key difference is up in the top corner, we'll see the portal is actually named as Service Management Portal. Of course, we can customize that. And the providers that we've enabled in the environment are listed down the left-hand pane. As with Azure, we can click the drawer and select the different providers we'd like to configure. And as an administrator, we need to actually configure these to deliver service. So in this case, I'm opening the SQL provider and stating the name of the SQL server I'd like to connect to. And all I need here is to provide a local SQL accounts. And once that I've made an authenticated connection through my firewalls to that particular SQL server, I now have that available as a pool of resource so that I can start designating this into plans and subscriptions for my end users to actually consume. This same sequence stands true for all of the other providers. So if it happens to be Microsoft SQL or MS SQL, if it happens to be virtual machines, or even if it happens to be websites, all of the providers offer the same set of functionalities and allow us as administrators to take control of the systems that are sitting in the back end of our environment. We have the ability in the website role, for example, to manage the environment, specifically the first endpoint that we connect to, which is the controller, the file server that's responsible for hosting the websites, and of course any certificates that our users may need to bind to those websites. The front end, which acts quite similarly to a load balancing type technologies. The management server, whose task is to ensure that everything is running right and essentially orchestrating with the controller. And the publishers. These are the servers that are going to communicate with the end users, our tenants, as they start to publish stuff. This publishing can be done through the standard file share. It can be done through FTP. It even can be done through software version control technologies. And finally, behind the scenes, we have web workers. And there are two types of web workers. The shared web worker, whose task is to actually host an instance of IIS with a website on it that would be shared with other websites, or of course a reserved web worker, which designed in such a way that it will only host one specific website. And as administrators, we can add more web workers by simply using the administrative portal, providing the name of the server that we want configured, providing some information about how big or how small that worker will be, and we can use our automation technologies to have these workers delivered as virtual machines automatically for us. And then through the use of the controller and the management server, the rest of the configuration of that server will be automated through the service management provider services. We have full control over the complete configuration, including the DNS endpoints that we're going to use, how we're going to publish the services, and even what the names of our sites are going to be listed as we publish them in the DNS environment. So there you have it. That's an initial quick view of what the administrative experience looks like behind the Windows Azure portal. And as you can quickly see, we have definitely got ourselves a unified environment. So are these providers just more than web parts? Well, I think we've answered that question already, and that is a definite yes. These providers provide us a huge amount of abilities, not only allowing us to control, but to allow us to return information and gather utilization. And the providers are quite rich in what they enable for us. They help us to configure the actual services in the backend, certainly in the case of the websites. They enable things like version control and allow us to provide full self-service management to these websites to our end users. In a very similar vein, the providers for virtual machines continue to keep that consistent look and feel. They allow us to take all of the different types of virtual machines, including the whole idea of roles, introduce the concept of a gallery where we can take virtual machines, configure them to deliver specific services, for example, SharePoint, or even Exchange, or maybe even a complete link deployment. There's tools that allows you to deliver your own gallery items, so you can deliver your own business services as an item. You can manage fully Windows and Linux in a remote desktop console using the RD gateway technologies included with Windows Server 2012 or 2. And of course, the system manages and maintains and supports complete support for software-defined networking, point-to-point tunnels, and all of the older technologies of VLAN-based installation. From a database perspective, we have in the box support for Microsoft and MySQL. All database connections are done through SQL authentication. And again, we have the ability for full quota management and the utilization of those databases we offer to our users. This enables us to deliver services like websites where a database in the backend is required. Now the users can not only self-service their website, but they can also self-service the database that may be needed to deliver that website. For example, maybe they're hosting a WordPress site. Automation is key to everything, and behind the scenes, currently only to the administrators, is an automation engine which is powered by PowerShell, runs consistently with the PowerShell modules, and has an embedded HTML code editor. This is very similar to the power of Orchestrator without the graphical interfaces, but with a whole lot of additional features that are definitely encouraged to investigate. That is the service management automation feature of the Azure Pack. And of course, for the developers out there that want to actually start writing PaaS applications and move into the Azure cloud, Service Bus has now been enabled on-premise, so we can develop in-house using the Service Bus features of our Azure Pack, and then take that code and modify it quite simply to port it over as far as the public Azure environment. So now let's take a quick look at what it looks like from a user to actually consume some of these things. Our first feeling as we talk about new portals for users is the training and learning curve that's required to get the user up to speed. The Azure Pack portal, however, is completely different. This is not the case anymore, as this portal is delivered with a built-in tour or training application. By clicking through this welcome procedure, the first thing we're offered is a quick tour of where each of the different parts of the portal exists, including the drawers, login and log out, how to stop and start our services. And due to the consistent look and feel of the portal, once the user completes this tour, they'll have a very clear idea of how to utilize the environment. Similarly to the administrative portal, the drawer at the bottom is where we can start defining or requesting our resources. So clicking New we can quickly see the providers that we've offered, and those providers then can be utilized for delivering new services as a self-service. In the case of a web app, we can deliver this as a custom developed product or leverage the gallery of previously published services. This gallery can be customized with our own resources, or we can connect to Microsoft and utilize some of the resources they provided. For example, let's select WordPress to deliver to our environment. The first thing we'll notice is that we need to deliver a new site name. And this new site name will be based on the name provided and the DNS name that we configured as administrators when we provisioned support in our environment to deliver websites. Of course, website requires a new MySQL database. So as we take a closer look, we can now move through the wizard and provide a name for that database. We only created a single database type and didn't even complete the database as administrators. So therefore, there isn't actually a database in the backend, but the user doesn't know that because we provisioned him an empty subscription at this point. However, the self-service environment is going to adhere to those and allow us to continue through the environment's setup procedures. Providing a very simple username and password for that database connection that will be used by the WordPress deployment, we can complete the wizard, and behind the scenes, the Azure Pack will start the procedures of implementing both the website and the database. But given the fact that we forgot to actually provision a database, Azure returns pretty promptly to confirm that you do not have any quota or any availability to deliver the database. So therefore, as that's a requirement for your website, we can pull out. So the consistent feel of this Azure Pack portal allows us not only to deliver websites and virtual machines, service buses, and any other provided services that we deliver from IT, but allows us to actually start unifying the experience our users have as they try to leverage services offered to IT. The other key area that we need to consider when we're delivering services, of course, is managing all of this. How do we meter, do we bill, and can we get our reports to understand where our environment is using? Azure Pack is delivered with a service reporting interface, which together with Microsoft SQL Analyst services allows us to create very customized reports on Excel or on Power Pivot, and of course with the standard SQL reporting services. All of the providers follow the same APIs, so therefore we can get information on utilization, for example, through websites, number of hits per second. For virtual machines, we can get number of IOs per second, or for things like the SQL bus, we can get the number of SQL queries per second, or different details that are responsible for helping us to actually validate how utilization is happening, and more importantly, allow us to provide quota and chargeback services for those resources that we're offering as IT services. So does all of this combine really to deliver a single pane? Well, yes, it certainly does. This is the initial foundation and framework to allow us to deliver IT as a service and start leveraging the services that we've seen all day, services that have been delivered to things like Service Manager, Operations Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, and key resources coming out of Microsoft's own Windows Core. These services are delivered to us to the Azure portal as providers. And the providers, you can of course contribute to as well. These program against the APIs we've looked at, and the SDKs for delivering those is freely available with some samples published at the download site that I've linked to here in the presentation. But is anybody actually doing this? Yes, a number of third parties, including Cloud Cruiser, who've provided us with a rich chargeback system, and a new company known as GridPro. GridPro have taken this step further and allowed us to add request management to our administrative portal, allowing us to connect GridPro through Azure Pack onto our Service Manager backends, again across that HTTP connection. And then as an end user, we now have a new feature, which is requests. still following the same consistent look and feel, allowing us to select how we want to define the offerings and allow our users to consistently select the request offerings just as they were for our websites a little bit earlier on, providing the details that is necessary to service up that request or incident, and deliver all of the normal contextual information that we would use as administrators or as support teams delivering this service to our users. The user's experience is unified, it's consistent, and it allows us to ensure that that single pane of glass, let us be delivering a web request, a virtual machine, a database, the procedures will remain the same throughout the life cycle. Microsoft's Azure Pack is indeed the first step towards delivering not only a single pane of glass for on-premise, but Microsoft's Azure Pack allows us to take that same pane of glass and look through it as we start looking at the Azure Pack and Microsoft's public Azure services. From here, we have the ability to start delivering our users a unified experience as we prepare as IT organizations to take our cloud OS on-premise and make it hybrid and start connecting together our technologies using software-defined networks and using Azure as the platform for delivering IT as a service. It's been a whirlwind and there's been quite a lot to cover as we look at what the Azure Pack does, its framework, its providers, and that single pane of glass view that we start to envision. We've looked at a lot of different technologies that format the cloud OS as we've followed through today. If you have questions, you need additional help, or you want to provide some comments and feedback, then please reach out to myself using any of the methods presented on screen, or of course engage with the rest of the MVP community on the cloud OS itself. Check out Microsoft's Cloud OS website, download the free evaluation functions, and lest I forget, I should also mention that the Windows Azure Pack that we've just looked at today, delivering you IT as a service, is available now and is available for free. Thank you for listening.